So it's been 15 days since the election, since Trump lost the election and Biden won the election. And there's still been absolutely zero evidence of voter fraud. None. And I'm going to get to that because I was listening to Fox News on the way home, and Rudy Giuliani was on Sean Hannity talking about this tremendous amount of evidence that they've got for voter fraud. And all the evidence they've got, which is basically just a bunch of sworn affidavits from God knows who, because he won't tell us, all the evidence that they've got, they're going to prove it in court and they're going to overturn this election. And the fact that there's no evidence, there's literally no evidence aside from what we're going to talk about in a sec. This hasn't stopped all the president's goons from going around. I mean, not just Giuliani, but GOP goons and ogres from all over the country are refusing to admit that Trump lost the election and citing all of these weird, bizarre conspiracy theories. But what I want to talk about today is two things. Number one, the evidence that they're saying, but number two, what Giuliani, who's now currently really the only lawyer Trump has got, because all of the other legitimate lawyers all jumped ship. They were like, fuck this. This is a bunch of nonsense. We're out of here. Giuliani, goes on, has this crazy wild press conference talking about how there's all this fraud. And he said, I've got a quote here. This is a gross miscarriage of the process that would assure that these ballots are not fraudulent. He said, it's a fraud, an absolute fraud. Rudy Giuliani. However, when Giuliani was questioned by a Pennsylvania judge on this was on Tuesday, Giuliani said something completely different. This is not a fraud case, he said. So essentially, since the election, the Trump campaign and all of the goons have filed like 30 lawsuits. And the whole purpose of these is to stop the certification of the results, and or to have a bunch of ballots thrown out, ballots that are saying they're illegitimate. One of the big, conspiracy theories is that all of a sudden Biden came from behind in certain states, and the GOP is alleging, oh well, it must have been, a fraud, and they're saying the voting machines were contaminated and they're geared towards putting a bunch of calculating a bunch of fake ballots for Biden. It's just all nonsense. And the law firms that were originally representing Trump have all jumped ship. They've just withdrawn from litigation completely. The lead counsel who took over the Pennsylvania case, Mark Skarinsky, he even admitted, he said, look, none of these things that we're going to do are going to reverse the results of the election. Nevertheless, Giuliani went on Sean Hannity, which I was listening to on the way home, and said, in response to Hannity asking the question, what evidence do you have to support these claims of widespread voter fraud? Giuliani's response was, we have hundreds of sworn affidavits. Hundreds of sworn affidavits. So let's pretend that someone accuses you of murder. The cops show up to your house and they say, hey, Mr. Jones, we're accusing you of murder. And you say, murder? What, why? I mean, who did I kill? Where's your evidence? Oh, well, we have hundreds of sworn affidavits of people that said you killed someone. That's how low the Republicans have sunk. That their evidence, Giuliani, an attorney, is presenting the only evidence that he's got that there was widespread voter fraud was affidavits from a bunch of people. People, by the way, that he can't tell you who these people are because he's worried about their lives. This is what he said in the press conference today, is that I've got hundreds of affidavits all over the place from all kinds of people, but I can't tell you who those people are because I don't want to jeopardize their safety. The voting officials in Georgia are receiving death threats because they're not recounting the votes correctly. They're receiving death threats. Just regular government officials. in charge of making sure that our democracy functions properly and that these votes get counted correctly are receiving death threats if they don't cheat. This is what's happened to the GOP. They've sunk so low, the party of rule of law and defenders of the Constitution, they've sunk to the point where they are literally trying to overthrow the will of the American people so that they can stay in power. So now Giuliani on Sean Hannity said that they've got all kinds of evidence and that they're going to prove it and that we're going to see a big swarm of evidence and they're going to win a bunch of court cases. Court cases which, by the way, don't exist because they've all either been decided, dismissed, or thrown out because they've all been so absurd. Giuliani is literally lying to everybody. However, the everybody, which is the 70 million people that voted for Trump, they don't even bother to look up at any evidence. They don't. It's whatever Trump and his goons say. Well, yep, that's what happened. That's what happened. All you have to do is just read a court transcript of what Giuliani says to the judges, and then compare it to what he's saying on the news to the people, and you'll say, "Huh, wow, those don't really line up, do they?" The problem is we've got 70 million people in this world, in this country, that are just plain dumb.